The Juniper Tree. Long, long ago, some 2,000 years or so, there lived a rich man with a good and beautiful wife, and how they loved each other dearly, but sorrowed much that they had no children of their own, so greatly did they desire to have one, that the wife prayed for it day and night, but still they remained childless. In front of their little house was a court, in which grew a juniper tree, and one winter's day the wife stood beneath it to peel some apples, and as she was peeling them she cut her finger and watched the blood fall down upon the snow. "Ah," sighed the woman heavily, "if I had but a child, as red as blood, and as white as snow." And as she spoke those very words, her heart grew light within her, and it seemed to her that her wish was indeed granted, and she returned to the house feeling glad and comforted. A month passed, and the snow had all disappeared, and then another month went by, and all the earth was green again. So the months followed, one after the other, and first the trees budded in the woods, and soon the green branches grew thickly intertwined, and then the blossoms began to fall. Once again the wife stood beneath the juniper tree, and it was so full of sweet scent that her heart leaped for joy, and she was so overcome with her happiness that she fell to her knees. Presently the fruit became round and firm, and she was glad and at peace. But when they were fully ripe, she picked the berries and ate eagerly of them. And then she grew sad, and she grew ill. A little while later she called to her husband, and said to him, crying, "If I die, bury me beneath the juniper tree." Then she felt comforted and happy again, and before another month had passed, indeed she had a little child, and when she saw that it was as white as snow and as red as blood, her joy was so great that she passed away peacefully. Her husband buried her beneath the juniper tree, and he wept bitterly for her loss. By degrees, however, his sorrow grew less, and although at times he still grieved, he was able to go about as usual, and later on he married once more. He now had a little daughter born to him. The child of his first wife was a boy, who was as red as blood and white as snow. The mother loved her daughter very much, and when she looked at her and then looked at the boy, it pierced her heart to think he would always stand in the way of her own child, and she was continuously thinking how she could get the whole of the property for herself. You see, this evil, this wicked thought took possession of her more and more, greater and greater, and made her behave very unkindly towards the boy. She drove him from place to place with cuffings and buffetings, so that the poor child went about in fear, and had no peace from the time he left school to the time he went back. One day the little daughter came running to her mother in the storeroom, and said, "Mother, give me an apple." "Yes, my child," said the wife, and she gave her a beautiful apple from the chest. The chest indeed had a very large, heavy lid, and a grand iron lock. "Mother," said the little daughter again, "may not brother have an apple too?" The mother was angry at this, but she answered, "Yes, when he comes out of school, I suppose he can." Just then she looked out the window, and she saw him on his way, coming closer and closer, and it seemed as if an evil spirit had entered into her, for she snatched the apple out of her little daughter's hand and said, "You shall not have one before your brother." She threw the apple into the chest and shut it. The little boy now came in, and the evil spirit in the wife made her say kindly to him, "My son, will you have an apple?" And with those words she gave him a wicked look. "Oh, mother," said the boy as he looked at her, "how dreadful you look. Yes, give me an apple then." The thought came to her that she would kill him. "Come with me," she said, and she lifted up the lid of the chest. "Take one out for yourself." And as he bent over to do so, the evil spirit within her urged her on, and crash, down went the lid, and off went the little boy's little head. Then she was overwhelmed with fear at the thought of what she had done. "Oh, if only I can prevent anybody knowing that I did this," she thought. So she went down to her room and took a white handkerchief out of the top drawer. And then she set the boy's head again upon his shoulders and bound it with the handkerchief, so that nothing could be seen, and placed him on a chair by the door with an apple in his hand. Soon after this, the little daughter Marlene came up to her mother, who was stirring a pot of boiling water over the fire, and she said, "Mother, brother seems to be sitting by the door with an apple in his hand, and, well, he looks so pale. And when I ask him to give me the apple, he doesn't answer me, and, well, mother, I'm frightened." "Go to him again," said the mother, "and if he does not answer this time, give him a box on the ear." So Marlene went and said, "Brother, give me that apple, right now." But he did not say a word. He could not say a word. And then indeed, just as her mother had told her to, she gave him a stunning rap to the temple. And with that, his head rolled straight off. She was so terrified by this that she ran crying and screaming to her mother. "Oh," she said, "I have knocked off brother's head." And then she wept and wept, and nothing could stop her weeping. "What have you done?" said her mother. "Oh, but no one must know about it. So you must keep silence, my girl. What is done here cannot be unmade. I know. We will make him into puddings." And then she took the little boy and cut him up, cut, made him into puddings, and put him into the pot. But Marlene stood looking on, and all she could do was weep, and her tears fell into the pot, so that there was no need of salt. Presently the father came home, and sat down to his dinner. He looked around the homestead and asked, "Where is my son?" The mother said nothing, but gave him a large dish of black pudding, and Marlene still wept without end. The father again asked, "Where is my son?" "Oh, answered the wife, "he has gone into the country to his mother's great uncle, you see. Yes, that's what he told me. He's going to stay there for some time, you see." "What has he gone there for? And he never even said goodbye to me. That is strange," said the old man. The woman looked back at him. "Well, he likes being there. And really, he told me he should be away for almost 6 weeks. Don't worry, he's well looked after there." The old man rubbed his chin for a moment. I feel very unhappy about this. In case it should not be all right, and he ought to have said something, at least goodbye to me." But with this he went on with his dinner and said, "Little Marlene, why are you crying? Brother will soon be back." Then he asked his wife for more pudding, and as he ate, he threw the bones beneath the table. Little Marlene went upstairs and took her best silk handkerchief out of her bottom drawer, and in it she wrapped all the bones from under the table and carried them outside, and all the time she did nothing but weep. Then she laid them in the green grass under the juniper tree, and she had no sooner done so than all her sadness seemed to leave her, and she wept her final tears. But then the juniper tree began to move, and the branches waved backwards and forwards, first away from another and then all together again, as it might be someone clapping their hands for joy. After this a mist came around the tree, and in the midst of it there was a burning as of fire, and out of the fire flew a beautiful bird that rose high into the air, singing magnificently. And when it could no more be seen, the juniper tree stood there as before, but the silk handkerchief and the bones were all gone. Little Marlene now felt as light-hearted and happy as if her brother was still alive right beside her, and she went back to the house and sat down cheerfully to the table and began to eat. The bird flew away and alighted on the house of a goldsmith, beginning to sing. "My mother killed her little son. My father grieved when I was gone. My sister loved me best of all. She laid her handkerchief over me, and took my bones that they might lie underneath the juniper tree. Quit, quit, what a beautiful bird am I." The goldsmith was in his workshop, making a gold chain, when he heard the song of the bird upon his roof. He thought it so beautiful that he got up and ran out, and as he crossed the threshold, he lost one of his slippers. But he ran into the middle of the street with a slipper on one foot and a sock on the other. He still had on his apron, and still held the gold chain and the pincers in his hands. And so he stood gazing up at the bird while the sun came shining brightly down on the street. "Bird," he said, "how beautifully you sing. Ah, sing me that song once more, please." "Nay," said the bird, "I do not sing twice for nothing. You give me that gold chain, and I'll sing it for you once more." The goldsmith raised his eyebrow. "Ah, here is the chain. Take it. Just sing me that song again, please." The bird flew down and took the gold chain in his right claw, and then he alighted again in front of the goldsmith and sung once more the old song. And then he flew away and settled on the roof of a shoemaker's house, and he sung once again. The shoemaker heard him, and he jumped up and ran out in his shirt sleeves, stood looking up at the bird on the roof with his hands over his eyes to keep himself from being blinded by the sun. "Bird," he said, "oh, how beautiful you sing." And then he called through the door to his wife. "Wife, come out, you must see this. Here is this bird. Come and look at it and hear how beautifully it sings. Oh, you must." And then he called his daughter and children, and then the apprentices, girls and boys, and they all ran up the street to look at the splendid bird, and saw how wonderful it was with its red and green feathers, and its neck like burnished gold, eyes like two bright stars in its skull. "Bird," said the shoemaker, "sing me that song again." "Nay," answered the bird, "I do not sing twice for nothing. You must give me something in return." "Wife," said the man, "go into the garret. On the upper shelf you will see a pair of red shoes. Bring them to me." The wife went in and fetched the shoes. The shoemaker gave him to the bird. "There, now please, just sing me that song again, I beg you." And so the bird flew down and took the red shoes in his left claw, and then he went back to the roof and sang, "My mother killed her little son, my father grieved when I was gone. My sister loved me best of all, she laid her handkerchief over me, and took my bones that they might lie underneath the juniper tree. Kywitt, kywitt, what a beautiful bird am I." When he had finished, he flew away. He had the chain in his right claw and the shoes in his left, and he flew right away to a mill, and the mill went click-clack, click-clack, click-clack. Inside the mill were 20 of the miller's men hewing a stone, and as they went hick-hack, 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 the mill went click-clack, 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 and the bird settled on a lime tree in front of the mill, and it began to sing the song once more. But this time they changed it. "My mother killed her little son, then one of the men left off. My father grieved when I was gone. 2 more men left off and listened. My sister loved me best of all, then 4 more left off. She laid her handkerchief over me, and took my bones that they might lie. Now there were only 8 at work underneath, and now only 5, the juniper tree, and now only 1. Kywitt, kywitt, what a beautiful bird am I." Then he looked up, and the last one had left off work. "Bird," he said, "oh, what a beautiful song that was. Let me hear it too. Sing it once more, please." The bird answered again, "Nay, I do not sing twice for nothing. You give me that millstone and I will sing it once more." "Well, if it belonged to me alone," said the man, "you should certainly have it." The others chimed in, "Yes, yes, if he will sing again, he can have it. We don't mind." The bird came down, and all 20 millers set to and lifted up the stone with a beam, and the bird put his head through the hole and took the stone round his neck like a collar, and flew back with it to the tree and sang the old song once more. And when he had finished, he spread his wings, and with the chain in his right claw, the shoes in his left, and the millstone around his neck, he flew right away to his father's house. The father, the mother, and little Marlene were having their dinner. "How light-hearted I feel," said the father. "So pleased and cheerful now." "And I," said the mother. "Well, I feel so uneasy, as if a heavy thunderstorm were coming." Little Marlene was weeping, and she sat and wept and wept. But then the little bird came flying toward the house and settled upon the roof. "Oh, I do feel so happy," said the father, "and how beautifully the sun shines. I feel just as if I were going to see an old friend again. Yes, that is the feeling." Said the wife, "and I am so full of distress and uneasiness, it seems, that even my teeth chatter. And I feel as if there was a fire in my veins." And with that she tore open her dress, and all the while little Marlene sat in the corner and wept and wept, and the plate on her knees was wet with her salty tears. The bird now flew to the juniper tree and began to sing. "My mother killed her little son." The mother shut her eyes and her ears, that she might see and hear nothing, but there was a roaring sound in her ears, like that of a violent storm, and in her eyes a burning and flashing like lightning. "My father grieved when I was gone." "Look, mother," said the man, "at the beautiful bird that is singing so magnificently, and how warm and bright the sun is, and what a delicious scent of spice in the air. My sister loved me best of all." Then the little Marlene laid her head down on her knees and sobbed. "I must go outside to see the bird nearer," said the man. "Oh, please, do not go," cried the wife. "I feel as if the whole world were in flames." But the man went out, and he looked at the bird. "She laid her handkerchief over me, and took my bones that they may lie underneath the juniper tree. Quit, quit, what a beautiful bird am I." With that the bird let fall a gold chain, and it fell just round the man's neck, so that it fitted him perfectly, and went inside and said, "See what a splendid bird that is that has given me this beautiful gold chain, and looks so beautiful himself." But the wife was in such fear and turmoil that in her trouble she fell to the floor, and her cap fell from her head. And then the bird began to sing again. "My mother killed her little son." "Ah me," cried the wife, "if I were but 1,000 feet beneath the earth, that I might not hear that dreadful song. My father grieved when I was gone." Then the woman fell down again as if dead. "My sister loved me best of all." "Well," said little Marlene, "I will go out too and see if the bird will give me anything." And so she went out. She laid her handkerchief over me, and took my bones that they may lie, and he threw down the shoes to her underneath the juniper tree. Quit, quit, what a beautiful bird I am. And she now felt quite happy and light-hearted. She put on the shoes and danced and jumped about in them. Oh, I was so miserable, she said. When I came out, at least, but all that's past now. That is indeed a splendid bird, I will say, and he's given me this beautiful pair of red shoes. Oh, how red and beautiful they are. The wife sprang up, with her hair standing out from her head like the flames of a raging fire. Then I will go out too, she said, and see if it will lighten my misery. Oh, for right now I feel as if the world were coming to its very end. But as she crossed the threshold, crash! The bird threw the final gift of the millstone down upon her head, and the old woman was crushed to death. The father and the little Marlene heard the sound and ran out. But when they saw it, there was no old woman, naught but mist and flame and fire rising from the spot. And when these had passed, there stood the little brother, and he took the father and Marlene by the hand, and all three of them rejoiced, back together again. And so they went inside together, and sat down to their dinners, and ate. The Turnip. There were two brothers, who were both soldiers. The one was rich, and the other was poor. The poor man thought he would try to better himself, so pulling off his red coat he became a gardener, and dug his ground well, and sowed turnips. When the seed came up, there was one plant bigger than all the rest, and it kept getting larger and larger, and it seemed as if it would never cease growing, so that it might have been called the Prince of Turnips, for there never was such a one seen before, and never will again. At last it was so big that it filled an entire cart, and 2 oxen could hardly draw it. The gardener knew not what in the world to do with it, nor whether it would be a blessing or a curse. Well, one day he sat down and he said to himself, whatever will I do with this thing? If I sell it, it will bring no more than another. And for eating, well, the little turnips are better than this. The best thing is perhaps to carry it and give it to the king, as a mark of respect. Then he yoked his oxen, and drew the turnip to the court, and gave it to the king. And the king was indeed delighted. He said, "What a wonderful thing this is! I've seen many strange things, but such a monster as this I've never seen. Where did you get the seed? Or is it perhaps just your good luck? If so, you're a true child of fortune." The gardener shook his head. "Oh, no, Majesty, I'm no child of fortune. I'm a poor soldier, you see, who could never really have enough to live upon, so I laid aside my red coat and set to work, tilling the ground. Well, I do have a brother. He's rich, and your Majesty actually knows him well, and all the world knows him. Well, because I'm poor, everybody forgets me." And then the king took pity on him and said, "Well, you shall be poor no longer. I will give you so much that you shall be even richer than your brother." And then the king gave him land and gold and flocks, and made him so rich that his brother's fortune could not at all be compared with his. Well, when the brother had heard of all of this, and how something as a turnip had made him so rich, he envied him sorely. and bethought himself how he could contrive to get the same good fortune all for himself. However, he determined to manage more cleverly than his brother, and got together a rich present of gold and fine horses for the king, and thought he must have a much larger gift in return, surely, for if his brother had received so much for nothing but a turnip, what must his grand and gracious present really be worth? Of course, the king took the gift, and quite gracefully, and said that he knew not what to give in return more valuable and more wonderful than the great turnip. And so the soldier was forced to put it into his cart and drag it all the way home with him. When he reached his home, he knew not upon whom to vent his rage and spite, and at length some wicked thoughts came into his head, and so evil were these thoughts that he resolved to kill his brother. But not himself. He first hired some villains to do the deed, and having shown them where to lie in ambush, he went to his brother and said, "My dear brother, guess what? I have found a hidden treasure. Let's go and dig it up. We can share it between us." Of course, the other had no suspicions of his roguery. So they went out together, and as they were travelling along, the murderers rushed out upon him, bound him, and were going to hang him on a tree. But whilst they were all getting ready, they heard the trampling of a horse at a distance, which so frightened them that they pushed their prisoner neck and shoulders together in a sack, and swung him up by a cord into the tree, where they left him dangling and ran away. Meanwhile, he worked and worked and worked, until he made a hole that was large enough to poke his head out of. When the horseman finally came up, he proved to be a student, and a merry fellow at that, who was journeying along on his nag and singing as he went. As soon as the man in the sack saw him passing under the tree, he cried out, "Good morning! Good morning to thee, my friend." The student looked out everywhere, and he saw no one, and not knowing where the voice came from, he cried out, "Who's there? Who calls me?" Then the man in the tree answered, "Lift up thine eyes, friend, for behold, here I sit in the sack of wisdom. Here have I, in a short time, learned great and wondrous things. Compared to this seat, all the learning of the schools is empty air. A little longer, and I shall know all that a man can know, and shall come forth wiser than the wisest of mankind. Here I discern the signs and motions of the heavens and the stars, the laws that control the winds, the number of the sands on the seashores, the healing of the sick, the virtues of all simples, of birds and precious stones. When thou but once here, my friend, thou wouldest feel and own the power of knowledge." Well, the student listened to all this, and he wondered much. At last he said, "Blessed be the day and the hour when I find you, friend. Cannot you contrive to let me into the sack for a little while?" And then the other answered, as if very unwillingly, "A little space I may allow thee to sit here, if thou wilt reward me well and entreat me kindly. But thou must tarry yet an hour below, till I have learnt some little matters that are yet unknown to me. So the student sat himself down and waited a while. But the time began to hang heavily upon him, and he begged earnestly that he might ascend forthwith, for his thirst for knowledge was so great. And then the other pretended to give way and said, "Thou must let the sack of wisdom descend by untying yonder cord, and then thou shalt enter." So the student let him down, opened the sack, and set him free. "Now then," he cried, "let me ascend quickly." As he began to put himself into the sack, heels first. "Wait a while," said the gardener. "That is not the way." He then pushed him in head first, tied up the sack, and soon swung up the searcher after wisdom dangling in the air. "How is it with thee, friend?" he said. "Dost thou not feel that wisdom that comes unto you? Rest there in peace, till thou art a wiser man than thou were." So saying, he trotted off on the student's nag, and left the poor fellow to gather wisdom, until someone should come and finally let him down. The Three Languages. An aged count once lived in Switzerland, who had an only son. But this son was stupid, and could not learn a single thing. The father said one day, "Hark you, my son, try as I will, I can get nothing into your head. You must go from hence. I will give you into the care of a celebrated master, who shall see what he can do with you." The youth was thus sent into a strange town, and remained a whole year with the master. At the end of his time he came home again, and his father asked, "Now, my son, what have you learned?" "Well, father, I have learned what the dogs say when they bark." The father was angry. "Lord have mercy on us, is that all you have learned? I will send you into another town, to another master. Begone." The youth was taken thither, and stayed a year with this master likewise. When he came back, the father asked again, "Okay, my son, what have you learned?" And he answered, "Father, I've learned what the birds say." Well, the father fell into quite a rage, and he said, "Oh, you lost man! You have spent the precious time, and you've learned nothing. Aren't you ashamed to appear before me? I will send you to a third master, but if you learn nothing this time also, you'll no longer call me your father." The youth remained a whole year with the third master also, and when he came home again, his father inquired, "Well, my son, what have you learned?" He answered, "Well, father, I have this year learned what the frogs croak." Then the father fell into the most furious of anger, sprang up, called his people thither, and said, "This man is no longer my son. I drive him forth, and command you to take him out into the forest and kill him." They took him forth, but when they should have killed him, they could not do it for pity, and they let him go. And they cut the eyes and tongue out of a deer, so that they may be taken to the old man as a token of proof. But the youth continued to wander on, and after some time came to a fortress where he begged for a night's lodging. "Yes," said the lord of the castle, if you will pass the night down there in the old tower. Go on, but I warn you, it is at the peril of your life. You see, it's full of wild dogs, which bark and howl without ceasing, and at certain hours a man has been given to them, whom at once they devour. The whole district was in sorrow and dismay because of them, and yet no one could do anything to stop this. The youth, however, was without fear and said, "Just let me go down to the barking dogs, and give me something I can throw to them. They won't do anything to harm me." As he himself would have it so, they gave him some food for the wild animals, and led him down to the tower. When he went inside, the dogs did not bark at him, but they seemed to wag their tails, quite excited to see him, and they ate what he set before them. They did not hurt a single hair of his head, and the next morning, to the astonishment of everyone, he came out again quite safe and completely unharmed. And he said to the lord of the castle, "My lord, the dogs have revealed to me in their own language why they dwell here, and why they bring evil upon the land. You see, they are bewitched, and are obliged to watch over a great treasure, which is below in the tower. They cannot have any rest until it is taken away, and I have likewise learnt from their discourse how that is to be done." Well, all who heard this rejoiced, and the lord of the castle said he would adopt him as a son if he accomplished it successfully. He went down again, and as he knew what he had to do, he did it thoroughly, and brought a chest full of gold out with him. The howling of the wild dogs was henceforth silent. They had disappeared, and the entire country was free from its troubles. After some time, he took it in his head that he would travel to Rome. On the way he passed by a marsh, in which a number of frogs were sitting, croaking. He listened to them, and when he became aware of what they were saying, he grew very thoughtful and very sad. At last he arrived in Rome, where the Pope had just passed away, and there was a great doubt among the cardinals as to whom they should appoint as his successor. They at length agreed that the person should be chosen as Pope, who should be distinguished by some divine or miraculous token. And, just as that was decided upon, the young count entered into the church, and suddenly 2 snow-white doves flew upon his shoulders, and they remained sitting there. The ecclesiastics recognized therein the token from above, and asked him on the spot if he would be the new pope. Well, of course he was undecided, and he didn't know if he were worthy of all this, but he listened to the voices of the doves, and they counseled him to do it. At length he said yes. Then he was anointed and consecrated, and thus was fulfilled what he had heard from the frogs on his way, which had so affected him, that he was to be His Holiness the Pope. Then he had to sing a mass, and he did not know one word of it. But the 2 doves sat continually on his shoulders and helped him out, saying what he needed to say himself into his ear. The 4 Clever Brothers. "Dear children," said a poor man to his 4 sons, "I have nothing to give you. You must go out into the wide world and try your luck yourselves. Begin by learning some craft or another, and see how you can get on." So the four brothers took their walking sticks in their hands and their little bundles on their shoulders, and after bidding their father good-bye, went all out at the gate together. When they had got on some way, they came to 4 crossways, each leading to a different country. Then the eldest said, "Here we must part ways. But this day in 4 years' time, we will come back to this spot, and in the meantime, each must try what he can do for himself." So each brother went on their way, and as the eldest was hastening on, a man met with him, and asked him where he was going to. "I am going to try my luck out there in the world, and should like to begin by learning some trade or perhaps an art," he answered. And the man said back to him, "Then you can go with me, and I will teach you to become the most cunning thief that ever lived." "No," said the other, "that is not an honest calling. And what can one look to earn by it in the end but the gallows?" The man laughed and replied, "Oh, you need not fear the gallows, my friend, for I will teach you how to steal what will be fair game. I meddle with nothing but what one else can get or care anything about, and where no one can find you out." So the young man agreed to follow his trade, and he soon showed himself so clever that nothing could escape him that he had once set his mind upon. The second brother also met a man, who, when he found out what he was setting out upon, asked him what craft he meant to follow. "I do not know yet," he said. "Then come with me, and be a stargazer. It is a noble art, for nothing can be hidden from you when once you understand the cosmos." The plan pleased him quite a lot, and he soon became such a skillful stargazer that when he had served out his time and wanted to leave his master, he gave him a glass and said, "With this you can see all that is passing in the sky and on the earth, and nothing can be hidden from you." The third brother met with a huntsman, who took him with great care, and taught him so well all that there was to hunting, that he became very clever in the craft of the woods. And when he left his master, he gave him a bow and said, "Whatever you shoot at with this bow, you will be sure to hit." The youngest brother likewise met a man, who asked him what he wished to do. "Would you not like," he said, "to be a tailor?" "Oh, no," said the young man, sitting cross-legged from morning to night, working backwards and forwards with a needle and goose. "That will never suit me." "Oh, but," answered the man, "that is not the sort of tailoring. Come with me and you will learn quite another kind of craft from that." Well, he didn't know what better to do, so he came into a plan and learned tailoring from the beginning, and when he left his master, he gave him a needle and said, "You can sew anything with this, be it as soft as an egg or as hard as steel, and the joint will be so fine that there will be no seam visible to the eye." After the space of 4 years, and at the agreed-upon time, the 4 brothers met at the crossroads, having welcomed each other, set off toward their father's home, where they told him all that had happened to them, and how each of them had learned some craft. And then one day, as they were sitting before the house, under a very high tree, The father said, "I should like to try what each of you can do in this way." So he looked up and said to the second son, "At the top of this tree there is a finch's nest. Tell me, how many eggs are in it?" The stargazer took his glass. He looked up and said, "5." "Now," said the father to the eldest son, "take away the eggs without letting the bird that is sitting upon them and hatching them know anything of what you are doing." So the cunning thief climbed up the tree and brought away to his father the 5 eggs from under the bird, and it never saw or felt what he was doing, but kept sitting on it at its ease. Then the father took the eggs and put one on each corner of the table and the 5th in the middle, and he said to the huntsman, "Cut all the eggs in 2 pieces at one shot." So the huntsman took up his bow, and at one shot struck all the 5 eggs, just as his father wished. "Now comes your turn," he said to the young tailor. "Sew the eggs and the young birds in them back together again, so neatly that the shot shall have done them no harm." The tailor took up his needle and sewed the eggs just as he was told, and when he had done, the thief was sent to take them back to the nest and put them under the bird without its knowing it. And then she went on sitting and hatched them, and in a few days they crawled right out, and had only a little red streak across their necks where the tailor had sewn them together. "Well done, my sons," said the old man. "You certainly made good use of your time, and learned something that is worth knowing, but I am sure I do not know which ought to have the prize. Oh, that a time might soon come for you to turn your skill to some account." Not long after this, there was a great bustle in the country, for the king's daughter had been carried off by a mighty dragon, and the king mourned over his loss day and night, and made it known that whoever brought her back to him should have her for a wife. The 4 brothers said to each other, "Here it is. Here is our chance. Let's try and see what we can do." And they agreed to see whether they could not set the princess free. "I will soon find out where she is, however," said the stargazer, as he looked through his glass, and he soon cried out, "I see her far off, sitting upon a rock in the sea, and I can spy the dragon is close by guarding her." And then he went to the king and asked for a ship for himself and his brothers, and they sailed together over the sea till they came to the right place. There they found the princess sitting, as the stargazer had said, on the rock, and the dragon was lying asleep, with his head upon her lap. "I dare not shoot him," said the huntsman, "for I should kill the beautiful young lady also." And then the thief said, "Then allow me to try my skill," and went and stole her away from under the dragon, so quietly and gently that the beast did not know it, but went on peacefully snoring away in a deep dream. Then away they hastened with her, full of joy, in their boat towards the ship. But soon came the dragon roaring behind them through the air, for he awoke and missed the princess. But when he got over the boat and wanted to pounce upon them and carry off the princess, the huntsman took up his bow and shot him straight through the heart, that he fell down dead. But they were still not safe, for he was such a great beast that in his fall the waves overset the boat, and they had to swim in the open sea upon a few planks. So the tailor took his needle, and with a few large stitches put some planks together, and he sat down upon these and sailed about and gathered up all the pieces of the boat and tacked them back together so quickly that the boat was soon ready, and then they reached the ship and got home safe. When they had brought home the princess to her father, there was great rejoicing, and he said to the 4 brothers, "Well, one of you should marry her, but you must settle that amongst yourselves who it should be." Of course, there arose a quarrel between them, and the stargazer said, "If I had not found the princess out, all of your skill would have been of no use. Therefore, she ought to be mine." "Your seeing her would have done no use," said the thief, "if I had not taken her away from the dragon. She ought to be mine." "No, she is mine," said the huntsman, "for if I had not killed the dragon, he would, after all, have torn you and the princess into pieces." "And what about me?" said the tailor. "If I had not sewn the boat together again, you would have all drowned. Therefore she's mine by rights." And then the king put in a word and said, "Each of you is right, and as all cannot have the young lady, the best way is for neither of you to have her. For the truth is, there is somebody she likes a great deal better. But don't worry. To make up for your loss, I will give each of you as a reward for his skill half a kingdom." So the brothers agreed that his plan would be much better than either quarreling or marrying a lady who had no mind to have them in the first place. And the king then gave to each half a kingdom, just as he had said, and they lived happily on the rest of their days. Oh, and they took good care of their father, too. And they even found somebody to take great care of the young lady, just that one that she liked the most, and he liked her just the same. Then, to let either the dragon or perhaps one of the craftsmen have her again instead. The Salad. As a merry young huntsman was once going briskly along through the wood, there came up a little old woman who said to him, good day, you seem merry enough, but I'm hungry and thirsty. Do pray give me something to eat." Well, the huntsman, he took pity on her, and put his hand in his pocket, giving her what he had. Then he wanted to go on his way, but she took hold of him and said, "Listen, my friend, to what I'm going to tell you. I will reward you for your kindness. Go your way, and after a little time you will come to a tree where you will see 9 birds sitting on a cloak. Shoot into the midst of them, and one will fall down dead. The cloak will fall too. You must take it, for it is a wishing cloak, and when you wear it, you will find yourself at any place where you may wish to be. Cut open the dead bird, take out its heart, and keep it, and you will find a piece of gold under your pillow every morning when you rise. It is the bird's heart that will bring you this good luck." The huntsman thanked her, and he thought to himself, if all this does happen, certainly be a fine thing for me. When he had gone 100 or so steps, he heard a screaming and chirping in the branches over him, and looked up and saw a flock of birds pulling a cloak with their bills and feet, screaming, fighting, and tugging at each other, as if each wished to have it for themselves. "Well," said the huntsman, "this is indeed wonderful. It happens just as the old woman said." And then he shot into the midst of them, so that their feathers flew all about. Off went the flock, chattering away, but one fell down dead, and the cloak with it. And then the huntsman did just as the old woman told him, cut the old bird open, and took out the heart, carried the cloak home with him too. The next morning, when he awoke, he lifted up his pillow, and there lay a piece of gold glittering beneath. The same happened the next day, and indeed every single day whenever he arose. He heaped up a great deal of gold, of course, and at last thought to himself, of what use is all this gold to me whilst I am just languishing away at home? I best go out into the world and look about me. Then he took leave of his friends, and hung his bag and bow about his neck, and went his way. It so happened that his road one day led through a thick wood, at the end of which was a large castle in a green meadow, and at one of the windows stood an old woman with a very beautiful young lady by her side looking about them. Now, it's important to say that this old woman was a witch, and she said to the young lady, "There is a young man coming out of the wood. Don't you see him? He carries a wonderful prize. We must get it away from him. Oh, my dear child, for it is more fit for us than it is for him. He has a bird's heart that brings him a piece of gold beneath his pillow every morning." Meanwhile, the huntsman came nearer. He looked at the lady and said to himself, "I have been travelling so long that I should like to go into this castle and rest myself, for I have money enough to pay for anything that I want." But the real reason was that he wanted to see more of the beautiful lady. Then he went into the house, and was welcomed kindly, and it was not long before he was so much in love that he thought of nothing else but looking at the lady's eyes, and doing everything that she wished. And then the old woman said, Now is the time for getting the prize. Get the bird's heart." So the lady stole it away, and he never found any more gold under his pillow, for it lay now under the young lady, and the old woman took it away every morning. But he was so much in love that he never missed his prize. "Well," said the old witch, "we have got the bird's heart, but not the wishing cloak yet, and we still have to get it. We must." "Let us leave him that," said the young lady. "He's already lost his wealth. Surely that's enough." But then the witch was very angry and said, "Such a cloak is very rare. You don't understand how much of a wonderful thing it is. I must have it. No, I will have it." So she did as the old woman told her, and set herself at the window, looked about the country, and seemed very sorrowful. And then the huntsman said, "What makes you so sad?" "Alas, my dear sir," she said, "yonder lies the granite rock, where all the costly diamonds grow. I want so much to go there that whenever I think of it I cannot help being sorrowful. For who can reach such a place? Only the birds and the flies. It's impossible for men." "If that is all your grief," said the huntsman, "then I'll take you there, with all my heart." So he drew her under his cloak, and the moment he wished to be on the granite mountain, they were both there. The diamonds glittered so on all sides that they were delighted with the sight, and picked up the finest of them. But the old witch made a deep sleep come upon him. And he said to the young lady, "Let us sit down and rest ourselves a little. I'm so tired that I cannot stand any longer." And so they sat down, and he laid his head in her lap and fell asleep, and whilst he was sleeping on, she took the cloak from his shoulders, hung it upon her own, picked up the diamonds, and wished herself home again. When he awoke, he realized that his lady had tricked him and left him alone on that wild rock, and he said, "Alas, what roguery there is in this world." And there he sat in great grief and great fear, at a loss of what to do. Now this rock belonged to fierce giants who lived upon it, and as soon as he saw 3 of them striding about, he thought to himself, "I can only save myself by feigning to be asleep." So he laid himself down as if he were sound asleep in a beautiful dream. When the giants came up to him, the first pushed him with his foot, and he said, "What worm is this that lies here all curled up?" "Tread upon him and kill him," said the second. "It's not worth the trouble," said the third. "Let him live. He'll go climbing higher up the mountain. Some cloud will come rolling down and carry him away eventually." And they passed on. But the huntsman had heard all that they said, and as soon as they were gone, he climbed up to the top of the mountain. And when he sat there a short time, indeed a cloud came rolling around him, and caught him in a whirlwind, bearing him along for some time, till it settled in a garden, and he fell quite gently to the ground amongst the greens and cabbages. And then he looked around him and said, "Oh, I wish I had something to eat. If not, I shall be worse off than before, for here I see neither apples nor pears, nor really any kinds of fruits. Nothing but vegetables, indeed." At last he thought to himself, "Well, I can eat salad. It will refresh and strengthen me, I suppose." So he picked out a fine head and ate of it, but scarcely had he swallowed 2 bites when he felt himself quite changed, and saw with horror that he was turned into a donkey. However, he still felt very hungry, and the salad tasted so nice. So he ate on till he came to another kind of salad, and scarcely had he tasted it when he felt another change come over him, and saw that he was lucky enough to have returned to his old shape again. And then he laid himself down and slept off a little in his weariness, and when he awoke the next morning, he broke off a head both of the good and the bad salad, and he thought to himself, "This will help me to my fortune again, and enable me to pay off some folks for their treachery." So he went away to try and find the castle of his friends, and after wandering about a few days, he luckily found it. Then he stained his face all over brown, so that even his mother would not have known him, and went into the castle and asked for a lodging. "I am so tired," he said, "that I can go no farther." "Countryman," said the witch, "who are you? What is your business here?" "I am," he said, "a messenger, sent by the king to find the finest salad that grows under the sun. I have been lucky enough to find it, actually, and I've brought it with me. But the heat of the sun scorches so that it begins to wither, and I don't know if I can carry it any further. When the witch and the young lady heard of his beautiful salad, they of course longed to taste it. And they said, "Oh, dear countryman, please, you must let us have some." The man was delighted. "To be sure," he answered, "I have 2 heads of it with me, and I'll certainly give you one of them." So he opened his bag and gave them the bad head. And then the witch herself took it into the kitchen to be dressed, and when it was ready, she could not wait till it was carried up, but took a few leaves immediately and put them in her mouth, and scarcely they were swallowed when she lost her form, and she ran braying down into the court in the form of a donkey. Now, the servant maid came into the kitchen, and seeing the salad ready, was going to carry it up. But on the way she too felt a wish to taste it, just as the old woman had done, and she ate some leaves. So she also was turned into a donkey and ran after the other, letting the dish with the salad fall on the ground. The man sat all this time with the beautiful young lady, and as nobody came with the salad, she longed to taste it. She said, "I don't know where the salad can be." Then he thought that something must have happened, and said, "I will go into the kitchen and see. You just wait here." And as he went and saw the 2 donkeys in the court running about, and the salad lying on the ground, "All right," he said, "it seems those 2 have had their share." Then he took up the rest of the leaves, laid them on the dish, and brought them to the young lady, saying, "I bring you the dish myself, so that you don't have to wait a moment longer." And so, with a gleeful expression, she ate of it, and like the others, ran off into the court, braying away. Then the huntsman washed his face, and went into the court, that they might know him. "Now you shall be paid for your roguery," he said, and tied them all 3 to a rope, and took them along with him, until he came to a mill and knocked at the window. The miller looked out. "What is the matter? Who comes knocking?" "I have 3 tiresome beasts here," said the man. "If you take them, give them food and room, and treat them as I tell you, I'll pay you whatever you ask." "With all my heart," said the miller, "but how should I treat them?" And then the huntsman said, "Give the old one stripes 3 times a day and hay once. Give the next one, who was the servant maid, stripes once a day and hay 3 times. And give the youngest, who was the beautiful lady, hay 3 times a day and no stripes." For he could not find in his heart to have her whipped. Well, after this he went back to the castle, where he found everything that he could have ever wanted. Some days after, the miller came to him and told him that the oldest of the donkeys was dead. "The other 2," he said, "are alive and eat, but they seem so sorrowful that they can't last long." Well, the huntsman pitied them, and told the miller to drive them back to him, and when they came, he gave them some of the good salad to eat. And the beautiful young lady fell upon her knees before him, and said, "Oh, dearest huntsman, forgive me all the ill I've done to you. My mother forced it upon me. It was against my will, for I always loved you very much, I swear. Your wishing cloak hangs up in my closet, and as for the bird's heart, I've left that for you too." But the man said, "You can keep it, it will be just the same thing, for I mean to make you my wife." And so they were married, and they lived together happily until they died of old age. The Water of Life. In the days long before you or I were born, there reigned in a country a great way off a king with 3 sons. This king once fell very ill, and so ill nobody thought he could survive. His sons were very much grieved at their father's illness, and as much as they were walking together very mournfully in the garden of the palace, a little old man met them and asked them what was the matter. They told him straight up that their father was very ill, and that they were afraid nothing could save him. "I know what would save him," said the little old man. "It's the water of life. If he could have a draught of that, he'd be well again for sure. But it's very hard to get." Then the eldest son said, "I will soon find it." And he went to the sick king and begged that he might go in search of the water of life, as it was the only thing that could save him. But the king refused. "No," he said, "I had rather die than place you in such great danger as you must meet with on this journey." But he begged so hard that the king resigned himself and finally let him go. The prince finally thought to himself, "If I bring my father this water, he will make me the sole heir to the kingdom." And then he set out, and when he had gone on his way some time, he came to a deep valley, overhung with great rocks and thick woods, and as he looked around, he saw standing above him on one of the rocks an ugly little dwarf, with a sugar-loaf cap and a scarlet cloak, and the dwarf called out to him and said, "Prince, whither so fast?" "What is it that to thee, you ugly imp?" said the prince haughtily, and rode on. But the dwarf was enraged at this behavior, and laid a spell of ill luck upon him, so that as he rode on the mountain pass became narrower and narrower, and at last the way was so straitened that he could not go a step forward, and when he thought to have turned his horse round and go back the way he came, he heard a loud cackle ringing around him, and found that the path was closed, so that he was shut in all around. He next tried to get off his horse and make his way on foot, but again that horrible laugh rang out in his ears, and he found himself unable to move a single step, and thus he was forced to abide, spellbound. Meanwhile, the old king was lingering on in daily hope of his son's return, till at last the second son said, "Father, I will go in search of the water of life." For he thought to himself, "My brother is surely dead, and the kingdom will fall to me if I find the water." The king was at first very unwilling to let him go, but at last yielded to his wish. So he set out and followed the same road which his brother had done, and he met with the same little dwarf, who stopped him at the same spot in the mountains, saying as before, "Prince, whither so fast?" "Mind your own affairs, you busybody little dwarf," said the prince with scorn, and he rode on. Once again, The dwarf put the same spell upon him as he had put upon his elder brother, and he, too, was at last obliged to take up his abode in the heart of the mountains. Thus, it is with the proud, silly people who think themselves above everybody else, and are too proud to ask, let alone take advice. When the second prince had thus been gone a long time, the younger son said he would go and search for the water of life, and trusted he should soon be able to make his father well again. And so he set out, and the dwarf met him too at the same spot in the valley among the mountains, and said, "Prince, whither so fast?" But this time the prince said, "I'm going in search of the water of life, because my father is ill, and I don't want him to die. Can you help me? Pray, be kind and aid me if you can. Do you know where it is to be found?" he asked the dwarf. And the dwarf responded, "No, prince, I do not. Pray, tell me if you know. Then, as you have spoken to me so kindly, and are indeed wise enough to seek advice, I will tell you how and where to go. The water you seek springs from a well in an enchanted castle, and that you may be able to reach it in safety, I will give you an iron wand and 2 little loaves of bread. Strike the iron door of the castle 3 times with the wand, and it will open for you. But there will be 2 hungry lions lying down inside, gaping for their prey. But if you throw them the bread, they will let you pass. Then hasten on to the well, and take some of the water of life. But you must before the clock strikes 12, for if you delay longer, the door will be shut upon you forever." Then the prince thanked his little friend with the scarlet cloak for his friendly aid, and took the wand, and took the bread, and went travelling on and on, over sea and land, till he came to the end of his journey. And when he came there, he found everything to be exactly as the dwarf had told him. The door flew open at the 3rd stroke of the wand, and when the lions were quieted, he went on through the castle, and came at length to a beautiful hall. Around it he saw several knights, sitting in a trance, and then he pulled off their rings, and put them on his own fingers. In another room he saw on a table a sword and a loaf of bread, and he took them too. Further on he came to a room where a beautiful young lady sat upon a couch. She welcomed him joyfully, and said if he would set her free from the spell that bound her, the kingdom should be his, if he would come back in a year and marry her. And then she told him that the well that held the water of life was in the palace gardens, and bade him to make haste and draw what he wanted before the clock struck 12. He walked on, and as he walked through the beautiful gardens, he came to a delightful shady spot, in which stood a couch, and he thought to himself, as he felt tired, he simply must rest for a while, and gaze on the lovely scene that was around him. And so he laid himself down, and sleep fell upon him unawares, so that he did not wake up until the clock was striking 11:45. And then, dreadfully frightened, he sprung up, ran to the well, filled a cup that was standing by him full of water, and hastened to get away in time. But just as he was going out, the iron door, it struck 12, and the door fell so quickly upon him that it snapped off a piece of his heel. When he found himself safe, he was overjoyed to think that he had got the water of life, and as he was going on his way homewards, he passed by the little dwarf, who, when he saw the sword and loaf, said, "You have made a noble prize. With a sword you can at a blow slay whole armies, and that bread, that will never fail you." And then the prince thought to himself, "But I cannot go home to father without my brothers." So he said, "My dear friend, can you tell me, where are my two brothers who set out in search of the water of life before me? They never came back." The dwarf replied, "I have shut them up by a charm between the two mountains, because they were proud and ill-behaved and scorned to ask advice." The prince begged so hard for his brothers that the dwarf at last set them free, albeit unwillingly, saying a warning, "Beware of them, for they have bad hearts." Their brother, however, was greatly rejoiced to see them, and told them all that had happened to him, how he had found the water of life and had taken a cup full of it, and how he had set a beautiful princess free from a spell that bound her, and how she had engaged to wait a whole year, and then to marry him, and to give him the kingdom. Then all three of them rode on together, and on their way home came to a country that was laid waste by war and a dreadful famine, so that it was feared that all must die for want. But the prince gave the king of the land the bread, and all of his kingdom ate of it. And he lent the king the wonderful sword, and he slew the enemy's army with it, and thus the kingdom was once more in peace and plenty. In the same manner, he befriended two other countries through which they passed on their way. When they finally came to the sea, they got into a ship, and during their voyage the two elders said to themselves, "Our brother has got the water, which we could not find. Therefore our father will forsake us, and give him the kingdom, which is our right." And so they were full of envy, and clenched fists revenge, and agreed together how they could bring about his ruin. They waited till he was fast asleep, and poured the water of life out of the cup, and took it for themselves, giving him bitter sea water instead. When they came to their journey's end, the youngest son brought his cup to the sickly king, that he might drink and finally be healed. Scarcely, however, had he tasted the bitter, salty sea water when he became worse than he was before, and then both the elder sons came in and blamed the youngest for what they themselves had done, and they even said that he wanted to poison their father. But they had found the water of life, and had brought it with them. He no sooner began to drink of what they brought him, than he felt his sickness leave him, and was as strong and as well as in his younger days. And then they went to their brother, and they laughed at him. "Well, brother, you found the water of life, did you? You have had the trouble, and we shall have the reward. Pray, with all your cleverness, why did you not manage to keep your damned eyes open? Next year one of us will take away your beautiful little princess, if you do not take care. You had better say nothing about this to our father, by the way. for he does not believe a single word that leaves your mouth, and if you tell tales you'll lose your life into the bargain, so be quiet, and we might let you off." The old king was of course still very angry with his youngest son, and thought that he really meant to have taken away his life. So he called his court together, and he asked what should be done, and all agreed that he ought to be put to death. The prince knew nothing of what was going on, until one day when the king's chief huntsman went a hunting with him, and they were alone in the wood together. The huntsman looked so sorrowful that the prince said to him, "My friend, what is the matter with you?" "I cannot, and I dare not tell you," he said. But the prince begged and insisted, and finally he said, "Only tell me what it is, and don't think I should be angry, for I will forgive you no matter what." The huntsman finally gave in. "Alas, the king has ordered me to shoot you, my friend." The prince was shocked at this, and he said, "Let me live, and I will change dresses with you. You shall take my royal coat to show my father, and you give me your shabby one." "With all my heart," said the huntsman. "I am sure I shall be glad to save you. I couldn't have shot you anyway." Then he took the prince's coat and gave him the shabby old one, and went away through the wood. After some time, 3 grand embassies came to the king's court, with rich gifts of gold and precious stones for his youngest son. Now, all of these were sent from the 3 kings to whom he had lent his sword and loaf of bread, in order to rid them of their enemy and feed their people. This touched the old king's heart, and upon reflection he thought his son might still be guiltless. And he said to his court, "Oh, that my son was still alive! How it grieves me that I had him killed." "He is still alive," said the huntsman, "and I'm quite glad that I had pity on him. But let him go in peace," and brought home his royal coat. At this, the king was overwhelmed with joy, and made it known throughout all his kingdom that if his son would come back to his court, he would immediately forgive him. Meanwhile, the princess was eagerly waiting till her deliverer should come back, and had a road made leading up to her palace, all of shining gold, and told her courtiers that whoever came on horseback and rode straight up to the gate upon it was her true lover, and that they must let him in. But whoever rode on one side of it, they must be sure that was not the right one, and they must send him away at once. Of course, the time soon came when the eldest brother thought he would make haste to go to the princess and say that he was the one who had to set her free, and that he should have her for his wife, and of course the kingdom at that. As he came before the palace and saw the golden road, he stopped to look at it. He thought to himself, "It is a pity to ride upon this beautiful road." So he turned aside and rode on the right side of it, but when he came to the gate, the guards, who had seen the road he took, said to him he could not be what he said he was, and must go about his business. The doors are closed. The second prince set out soon afterwards, on the same errand, and when he came to the golden road, and his horse had set one foot upon it, he thought it was very beautiful too, and he said to himself, "What a pity it is that anything should tread here." and then he too turned aside and rode on the left of it. But when he came to the gate, the guard said that he was not the true prince, and that he too must go away about his business. And away he went. Now, when the full year was come around, the third brother left the forest in which he had lain hid for fear of his father's anger, and set out in search of his betrothed bride. So he journeyed on, thinking of her all the way, and rode so quickly that he did not even see what the road was made of. But when his horse went straight over it, and as he come to the gate, it flew wide open, and the princess welcomed him with joy, and said he was her deliverer, and should now be her husband and lord of the kingdom. Well, when the first joy of their meeting was over, the princess told him she had heard of his father having forgiven him, and of his wish to have him home again. So, before his wedding with the princess, he went to visit his father, taking her with him. And then he told him everything, how his brothers had cheated and robbed him, and yet that he had borne all of those wrongs for the love and respect of his father. The old king was very angry, and wanted to punish his wicked sons, but they had already made their escape, and got into a ship, sailing away over the wide sea, and where they went to, nobody knew, and nobody cared. And now the old king gathered together his court, and asked all his kingdom to come and celebrate the wedding of his son and the princess. And young and old, noble and squire, gentle and simple, came at once upon the summons, and among the rest came the friendly dwarf with that sugar-loaf hat and a new scarlet cloak. And the wedding was held, and the merry bells run, and all the good people they danced and they sung, and feasted and frolicked, I cannot tell of how long. The Frog Prince, a tale from the brothers Grimm. One fine evening, a young princess put on her bonnet and clogs and went out to take a walk by herself in a wood. And when she came to a cool spring of water that rose in the midst of it, she sat herself down to rest a while. Now she had a golden ball in her hand, which was her favourite plaything, and she was always tossing it up into the air and catching it again as it fell. After a time she threw it up so high that she missed catching it as it fell, and the ball bounded away, and rolled along upon the ground, till at last it fell down into the spring. The princess looked into the spring after her ball, but it was very deep, so deep that she could not see the bottom of it. And then the young princess began to bewail her loss, and said, "Oh, alas, if only I could get my ball again! I would give all my fine clothes and jewels, and everything that I have in the world." While she was speaking, a frog put its head out of the water and said, "Princess, why do you weep so bitterly?" "Oh, alas," said she, "what can you do for me, you nasty frog? My golden ball has fallen into the spring." The frog said, "I want not your pearls and jewels and fine clothes, but if you will love me, and let me live with you, and eat from off your golden plate, and sleep upon your bed, I will bring you your ball again." "What nonsense," thought the princess. "This silly frog is actually talking. He can never even get out of the spring to visit me, though he may be able to get my ball for me, and therefore, well, I will tell him he shall have what he asked." So she said to the frog, "Well, if you bring me my ball, I will do everything you ask." Thus the frog put his head down and dived deep, deep under the water, and after a little while he came up again, with the ball in his mouth, and threw it on the edge of the spring. As soon as the young princess saw her ball, she ran to pick it up, and she was so overjoyed to have it in her hand that she never even thought of the frog, but ran home with it as fast as she could. The frog called after her, "Princess, stay, stay, and take me with you as you said you would." But she did not stop. No, she did not stop to hear a word of it. The very next day, just as the princess had sat down to dinner, she heard a strange noise, as if something was coming up the marble staircase. And soon afterwards there was a gentle knock at the door, and a little voice cried out and said, "Open the door, my princess dear, open the door, to thy true love is here, and mind the words that thou and I said, by the fountain cool, in the greenwood shade." Then the princess ran to the door and opened it, and then she saw the frog, whom she had quite by this point well and truly forgotten. At this sight she was sadly frightened, and shutting the door as fast as she could, came back to her seat. The king, her father, seeing that something had indeed frightened her, asked her, "My daughter, what is the matter?" "Oh, there is a nasty frog at the door," said the princess. "One at the door that lifted my ball for me out of the spring this morning. I told him that he should live with me here, thinking that he could never get out of the spring anyway. But, there he is at the door, and, well, he wants to come in." While she was speaking, the frog knocked again at the door, and said, "Open the door, my princess dear, open the door to thy true love here, and mind the words that thou and I said by the fountain cool in the greenwood shade." Then the king said to the young princess, "Well, as you have given your word, you must keep it. So go on, let him in." So did she, and the frog hopped into the little room, and then straight on, tap, tap, from the bottom of the room to the top, until he came close to the table where the princess sat. "Pray lift me up upon the chair," said he to the princess, "and let me sit next to you." As soon as she had done this, the frog said, "Put your plate nearer to me, please, that I may eat out of it." This she did, and when he had eaten as much as he could, he said, "Now I am tired. Carry me upstairs and put me into your bed." And the princess, though quite unwilling, took him up in her little hands and put him upon the pillow of her own bed, where he slept all the night long. As soon as it was light, he jumped up, hopped downstairs, and went out of the house. "Now then," thought the princess, At last he is gone, and I shall be troubled with him no more." But the princess was sorely mistaken, for when night came she heard the same tapping at the door, and the frog came once more and said, "Open the door, my princess dear, open the door to thy true love here, and mind the words that thou and said by the cool fountain in the greenwood shade." And when the princess opened the door, the frog came in and slept upon her pillow as before till the morning broke. And the third night he did the same. But when the princess awoke on the following morning, she saw something that she did not expect. She was astonished to see that instead of a frog, there was a handsome prince, gazing upon her with the most beautiful eyes that she had ever seen, and standing at the head of the bed. He told her that he had been enchanted by a spiteful fairy, who had changed him into a frog, and that he had been fated so to abide till some princess should take him out of the spring, and let him eat from her plate, and sleep upon her bed for 3 nights. "You," said the prince, "have broken this cruel charm, and now I have nothing to wish for, but that you should go with me into my father's kingdom, where I will marry you, and love you as long as you live." The young princess, you may be sure, was not long in saying yes to all of this, and as they spoke a gay coach drove up, with 8 beautiful horses decked with plumes of feathers and a golden harness, and behind the coach rode the prince's servant, faithful Heinrich, who had bewailed the misfortunes of his dear master during this enchantment so long and so bitterly that his heart had well nigh burst. Then they took leave of the king, and got into the coach with 8 horses, and they all set out, full of joy and merriment, for the king's kingdom. And when they reached safely, there they lived happily for a great many, many years. The Tale of the Cat and Mouse in Partnership. Another story from the brothers Grimm. A certain cat had made the fine acquaintance of a mouse, and had said so much to her about the great love and friendship she had felt for her, that at length the mouse agreed that they should live and keep house together. "But we must make provision for the winter, you know, or else we shall suffer from hunger," said the cat. "And you, little mouse, cannot venture everywhere, or, mark my words, you will be caught in a trap some day, I tell you." The good advice was well and truly followed, and a pot of fat was brought, but they did not know where to put it. At length, and after much consideration, the cat said, "I know no place where it will be better stored up than in the church, for no one dares take anything from the church. Thus we will set it beneath the altar, and do not touch it until we are really in need of it." So the pot was placed in safety, but it was not long before the cat had a great yearning for it, and said to the mouse, "I want to tell you something, little mouse. My cousin has brought a little son into the world, and has asked me to be godmother. He is white with brown spots, and I am to hold him over the font at the christening. Let me go out today, and you will look after the house by yourself." "Oh, yes, yes," answered the mouse. "By all means go, and if you get anything very good to eat, please do not forget me. I should like a drop of sweet red christening wine myself, Yes, yes. All this, however, was untrue. The cat did not have a cousin, and had not been asked to be godmother. She went straight to the church, stole the pot of fat, began to lick at it, and licked the top of the fat off. Then she took a walk upon the roofs of the town, looked out for opportunities, and stretched herself in the sun, and licked her lips whenever she thought of that pot of fat, and not until it was evening did she return home. "Well, well, here you are again," said the mouse. "No doubt you have had a merry day." "All went off well," answered the cat. "What did they name the child?" "Top off," said the cat, quite coolly. "Top off," cried the mouse. "That is a very odd and uncommon name. Is it a usual one with your family?" "What does that matter?" said the cat. "It's no worse than Crumb Stealer, as your godchildren are called." Before long the cat was seized by another fit of yearning. She said to the mouse, "You must do me a favor, and once more manage the house for a day alone. I am again asked to be godmother, and as the child has a white ring around its neck, I simply cannot refuse." The mouse consented, but the cat crept behind the town walls to the church and devoured half the pot of fat. "Nothing ever seems so good as what one keeps to oneself," said she, and was quite satisfied with her day's work. When she went home, the mouse inquired, "And what was the child christened?" "Half done," answered the cat. "Half done? What are you saying? I've never heard a name like that in my life. I'll wager anything that it is not in the calendar." The cat's mouth soon began to water for some more licking. "All good things go in threes," she thought. "I am asked to stand godmother again. The child is quite black, only it has white paws, but with that exception it has not a single white hair on its whole body. This only happens once in every few years. It is very special. You will let me go, won't you?" "Top off, half done," answered the mouse. "They are such odd names. They make me very thoughtful." "You sit at home," said the cat, "in your dark grey fur coat and long tail, and are filled with fancies. That's because you don't go out in the daytime." During the cat's absence, the mouse cleaned the house and put it in order. But it was this day that the greedy cat entirely emptied the pot of fat. When everything was eaten up, "One has some peace," she said to herself. And well filled and fat, she did not return home till nightfall. The mouse at once asked what name had been given to the third child. "Well, it will not please you more than the others did," said the cat. "He is called All Gone." "All Gone," said the mouse. "Now that is the most suspicious name of all. I have never seen it in print. All Gone? What can that mean?" She shook her head, curled herself up, and lay down to sleep. From this time forth, no one invited the cat to be godmother. But when the winter had come, there was no longer anything to be found outside. The mouse thought of their provision and said, "Come, cat, we will go to our pot of fat which we have stored up for ourselves. We shall enjoy that." "Yes," answered the cat, "you will enjoy it as much as you would enjoy sticking that dainty tongue of yours out the window." They set out on their way, but when they arrived, the pot of fat was certainly still in its place, but there was no fat inside. It was completely empty. "Oh," said the mouse, "now I see what has happened. Now it comes to light. You are indeed a true friend. You have devoured all when you were standing godmother. First top off, then half done, then—" "Will you hold your tongue?" cried the cat. "One more word and I will eat you as well." All gone. It was already on the poor mouse's lips. Scarcely had she spoken it before the cat sprang upon her, seized her, and swallowed her down. Truly, that is the way of the world.